never even existed. Others suggest that the resurrection was an elaborate hoax. What do our experts say? The last 4 days of Jesus' life, commonly referred to as the Passion, is said to be the most intriguing yet controversial part of the Gospels. In the days leading up to his crucifixion, Jesus rode triumphantly into Jerusalem. As he passed through the city walls, spectators rushed out of their homes to greet him and shower him with palms ripped off of trees. This would later become what we commonly know today as Palm Sunday. Word of Jesus' arrival spread quickly to the Jewish high priests of Sanhedrin. They saw the popular Galilean as a serious threat to their control of the Jewish people. Caiaphas, the most skeptical and cynical of the Sanhedrin, conspired with the rest of the council to put an end to Jesus' ministry.
In the story of the trial of Jesus, there's this fellow Caiaphas, the high priest.
In the early 1990s, a significant archaeological discovery was made in an excavated tomb within the city of Jerusalem. A series of small boxes called ossuaries were found. Once the body of a loved one had completely decomposed, the family would gather the remains and place them inside one of these bone boxes.
And in order to remember whose bones are put in which box, they would scratch the names on the end of the box. So when this tomb was excavated, they actually found the name Caiaphas.
Among the bones they found in the box were those of a 60-year-old man. The name and date inscribed on the ossuary remarkably matched the description and time of Jewish high priest Caiaphas from the Gospels.
So do we have the bones of the high priest Caiaphas, who was the person mentioned in the trial of Jesus? Very likely.
On the first night of Passover, Jesus sat down with his 12 disciples for the Passover feast in what has become known as the Last Supper. It is at this fateful meal that Jesus revealed to his apostles, according to the Scriptures, he was to be betrayed by one of them.
I would begin with my thinking about the Passion with the Garden of Gethsemane.
Shortly following the Last Supper, Jesus arrived at the garden with 3 of his favorite disciples, Peter, John, and James.
When Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane after the Last Supper, he went up there to pray.
The Garden of Gethsemane was a quaint olive orchard that laid at the foot of a large hill outside Jerusalem. As the disciples slept and Jesus prayed in the still night, Judas crept into the garden along with a soldier dispatched from the Sanhedrin. Judas prearranged with the soldier that he would mark Jesus with a kiss of death.
Judas. Seize him!
Jesus was brought before the Sanhedrin at Caiaphas' house. There a mob had gathered for a clandestine trial in the dead of the night. Jesus admitted to the Sanhedrin that he was the Son of God.
They got it. They wanted to stone him for blasphemy after that.
Jesus was then taken before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, to be condemned to death.
Pontius Pilate is a historical character, and we know he's a historical character. This is one of those cases where we have corroboration for his existence and for his job. We know where he was and what he did.
Experts agree that there is a mountain of evidence that proves Pilate was the governor of Judea at the time of Christ's death.
We actually have an inscription. It was found back in the 60s by an Italian excavation crew who were working in Caesarea.
The excavation crew unearthed a stone that was part of a 4th century staircase. However, when they overturned the stone, they found that it had been reused and was actually from the 1st century.
When they turned it over, they found part of an inscription, and there very clearly on the inscription you could read the words Pontius Pilate and his position as the prefect of the area.
One of Pilate's duties was the production of currency for the region.
We also have coins that were minted by Pontius Pilate. So we know the dates when Pontius Pilate was the governor in Judea, and we know the dates of these coins. So by putting those two things together, we can know that we have coins that were minted by Pontius Pilate.
For many centuries, no record of the spot where Jesus was tried before being crucified had been discovered. It was here that Jesus was sentenced to be scourged. After they stripped and beat him, the soldiers placed a crown of thorns upon Jesus' head to mock him. They then led him up the hill to Calvary, pushing and kicking him as he struggled to carry his own cross. This chilling execution site had the foreboding name of Golgotha, place of the skull.
Coming up, could Jesus possibly have survived his brutal crucifixion and merely pretended to rise from the dead? Or is there scientific evidence that proves otherwise?
We've all seen the crucifixion of Jesus dramatically depicted in paintings and acted out in passion plays and films. But how does one go about this traditional form of barbaric execution?
We have lots of literary evidence of the use of crucifixion. Jesus was not the only person to ever be crucified, but it was relatively common. It was a horrible execution and usually used for what considered to be particularly horrible crimes.
The cross used in Palestine at the time was most likely what they call a tau cross, and what he would carry would be the horizontal beam only. The vertical part was already in the ground.
As Jesus struggled to climb the uneven, rocky streets of Jerusalem, his physical condition deteriorated.
Jesus was close to death, in effect, when he was carrying the crossbeam up to Calvary. As the blood volume goes down, the blood pressure goes down, so the heart rate increases. And we can see evidence of this as Jesus is carrying the cross up to Calvary. He is unable to take it all the way.
Once Jesus reached the top of the hill, he was thrown on the ground and his arms were stretched across the horizontal beam for nailing to the cross. Contrary to popular belief and depictions of the crucifixion, the spikes used to fasten Jesus to the cross were not nailed through the hand.
A nail through the palm of the hand could not support the weight of the body. It would tear through the flesh, and then he would fall off the cross.
They were driven at the base of the hand, just below what we would call the palm, and there's no way the person could free themselves.
Not only was the wrist a good, solid anchoring point, it was also a way of maximizing the pain as a major nerve passes through the carpal tunnel into the wrist.
That nail, as it's driven through, crushes the median nerve, which causes excruciating pain because it's worse than you bumping your elbow or your funny bone. Well, that's nothing compared to what would happen if you imagine just bumping the ulnar nerve, how much worse it would be if you took a pair of pliers and crushed the ulnar nerve.
Every time Jesus pushed up to relieve the weight of his body so that he could breathe, the nail would rotate on the raw end of the nerve, causing incredible pain. As the Romans raised his cross in the air and fitted it into the hole in the ground, his whole weight would be pulling on those nails in his wrists.
Literally is an excruciating experience, and that word excruciating comes from the Latin, which is ex crucio, out of the cross, ex crucio. And so the pain involved is just absolutely enormous.
To ensure that the man remained on the cross, And to make it even more difficult for him to push up and breathe, the Romans nailed his feet to the vertical beam of the cross. Archaeologists made a startling discovery when they found the ossuary or bone box of a man in his 20s named Ioannan. Carbon dating of the bones proved Ioannan lived and died at the same time as Jesus. When they began to take the bones out of the box to organize them, they found something very unusual.
In the ankle bone of this man